Morning, Mandy. Morning, Bob.
Morning, Harvey.
Hey, good morning.
Morning, Rabbi.
Rabbi.
Bob, you must have run home from shul.
Yeah.
Morning. Okay. Marvin had yahrzeit this morning, so I think it may take him a moment or two before getting on. But we're going to start with our sponsors, okay? The Year of Learning, Dr. Paul Koningsberg, in memory of his brother, Dr. Sam Koningsberg, Shimon Reuven ben Labush, and Ed Goldberg's cousin, Nissen Hara Nissen ben Fardosa. Paula and Bob Bromberg, in memory of their dear friend Julian Smith, Yehuda ben Yisrael. Malcolm Mann, in memory of her family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. The many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi, friends of Toby Paris, Sarah Tova bat Yisrael Dov, friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef, friends of Avi Gitler, Avram Meir ben Shimon, Cheryl Sher, her children and grandchildren, in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Arav Akiva, Marcia Federbush and family, in memory of her husband, Dr. Oriel Paul Federbush, Oriel ben Arav Shimon, friends of Joe Wolf, Yosef ben Chaim, Sharon and Fred Lisker, their family and many friends, in memory of her dear mom, Harriet Friedman, Edel Bas Yaakov. A month of learning, sponsored by Ruth Burian and Judy and Eddie Bourne, in memory of Ruth and Judy's mother, Hadassah bas Ezriel Zelig for Miriam, and Father Yitzchak ben Yosef for Esther. Jill and Perry Meltzer, in memory of her father, Yaakov ben Yosef. B. Pizer, in memory of her mother, Razel bat Shammai, and stepfather, Avram Michal ben Shmuel Halevi. Josh and Carol Sanborn, in memory of his mother, Chiena bas Aryeh Leib, and his father, Shmuel Aryeh ben Baruch. Mel and Haran Haller, in memory of his mother, Fega bas Yaakov. A week of learning by Sandra and Marty Levine and Brenda and Ed Parver, in memory of Sandra and Brenda's mother, Chaya Hudel bas Yaakov Leib, and their father, Betzalel ben Avraham Yehuda. The children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of Esther Shepatovsky, Esther Riva Bas Chazan Betzalel, Sid Peres, in memory of his mother, Yudit Bat Tzvi, and his father, Chaim Aharon HaKohen. Today being the 21st Day of Learning Plus Torah Fund by Marvin and Shirley Weinstein, in memory of his father, Yisrael Aaron ben Naftali Hertz. Today also a Day of Learning by Meir and Sarah Breben and Michael and Golda Breben, in memory of Meir and Michael's father, Asher Zelig ben Moshe, by Sandy and Sidney Goldschmidt, in memory of her mother, Sivya Bas Avraham Matisyahu, by Florence and Jay Levy, in memory of her mother, Blima Bas Peretz, by Arthur Ritholtz, in memory of his father, Baruch Leib ben Zev HaKohen. May the Shemas have an Aliyah, Krank Rafia, Velti Yeshir Hashem Matzaliyah, and the Hoban Israel, good Gaben Shtiar.
Amen.
Right, and I don't know if I said it on Friday, but Saturday was also a day of learning in honor by Judy and Herb Jeremias, in honor of Judy and Ari Cohen's moving into a new apartment and into the B'nai Mitzvah of their twin grandsons. Okay. All right. I'm going to start today on Sadi Aleph Amud Beis, very second to the last line with a new Mishnah. Okay. And then we'll go on and do today's daf, but I figure that's the best place to pick up. So we're seeing again, as we really come to a, so to speak, conclusion on this parak, okay, as to who can be included in the Chabura and who cannot be included. And if that's the case, what if somebody, we said, was Tameh or some other situation? And would they have time on Erev Pesach either to go to mikvah or to bring their korban, things like that, in order to be able to be included in the Chabura and eat the korban Pesach that night? Okay. So matnitin, our Mishnah taught, onen, and here by onen we're referring to, Koren used the term acute mourner. Okay, so we're talking about somebody in a sense who, remember traditionally, it's between the death and the actual burial. Okay, now the concern seems to be, might that person be tameh as well? Because our Mishnah continues, tovel, they have to immerse, va'ochel et pischo la'erev, and they are able to eat, okay, their chavura, with their chavura that night. So the death had to have occurred, let's say, either that same day, the 14th, or close to it, okay? Avel, lo b'kadoshim, but they are not permitted to eat other offerings. So an exception, according to the Mishnah, is made for that person for the Korban Pesach. Second component, Hashomea al meito, okay, one who hears about the death of a relative. Okay, so in other words, there's some time has passed. Okay, and v'hamilaket lo atzamot, and one gathering, let's say for the moment, the bones of his parents. Okay, and therefore that individual is also considered like an onen. Okay, right? Because remember what they did is they buried, okay, then afterwards they collected the bones and then put them into a, what might call an ossuary, okay, a stone container, into the family crypt, right? This case, tovel, Again, the person must immerse in the mikveh, v'ochel b'kedoshim, but that person may eat other offerings. Now, another case, ger, a Gentile that is converting, right? Shenit gayer be'erev Pesach. So that individual, classically at the time of the Gemara, not only went to mikveh, but had to bring korbanos as well as part of their conversion process. And they did so on Erev Pesach. What's their status? Beit Shammai omrim tovel va'ochel et pischo la'erev. According to Beit Shammai, they may immerse that same day. In other words, if it's a male, get their circumcision, bring their korbanos, and immerse in the mikveh, all on the 14th, and then be eligible to be included in a chabura as a Jew to eat the korban Pesach that evening. Ubeit Hillel omrim, however, Beit Hillel says, haporesh min ha'orla kiporesh min ha'kever, that one who separates himself from his orla, in other words, has circumcision that day, according to Beit Hillel, is not necessarily ready to go into the mikveh the same day. And therefore, in that case, is like someone who is leaving the grave. They've been involved, they still had perhaps tuma, and as a result, that individual, that convert, must wait and observe Pesach Sheni. So the Gemara starts off with our first example. My Tama, what's the reasoning that we about the acute mourner, the onen? Kasavar aninut delaila derabanan. Okay, don't we generally hold the opinion that aninut in the evening is rabbinical and not necessarily deoraita? As a result, it may be that if that's only derabanan and the eating of the korban pesach is deoraita that night, that's going to take precedence. V'gabe pesach lo ha'amidu divrehem b'makom karet. And in regards to the korban pesach, the rabbis did not strengthen their statement. They did not enforce, let's say, the statement, okay, of the prohibition, okay, of the fact that by not having korban pesach, the person would be chayav kores, and so therefore they permitted him to eat korban pesach. Gabe kadoshim he'amidu divreihem b'mkom aseh. But in regards to other offerings, the rabbis did, I'm going to use the word enforce their rule, okay? That the karet, okay, since the other karet is not implied for other offerings, and therefore it's simply by not participating in those other offerings, they might simply be over on an assay, okay? That was not felt reason enough for the rabbis to justify and maintain their rulings, right? Second example, Hashomea al Meito, said that was one who some time had passed, at least a day or two, and then they heard about, right, their deceased. Or the Milaket Atzamot, that a person was collecting the bones of parents. Ha-bai haza'at shlishi ushvi'i. In that case, if we go to the one collecting the bones, they would be considered tameh, as if with tameh by a corpse. As a result, they need sprinkling for the third day and the seventh day. Ema, I might say in this case, sheliktu lo atzamot, that maybe we should phrase our Mishnah that that individual did not collect the bones himself, okay, or herself, but others collected the bones for them, and therefore they did not become tameh from like a corpse. Next example, okay, right? Ger shenitgayer v'chule, okay, the Gentile convert. Amar Rava bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Machloket ba'arel nachri. It seems that there's an argument vis-a-vis a Gentile convert. The Beit Hillel Savre, Gzera Shema Yitame L'Shana Haba'ah. That Beit Hillel gives their reason, lest the person, that we need to make a decree, lest the person become Tameh in the Shana Haba'ah, okay, at the occasion of the Pesach or pre-Pesach that they're converting. Why? V'yomar, because the person might say to themselves as follows: Eshtakad milo tavalti va'achalti. Last year I didn't immerse and I was able to eat. Achshav, in other words, maybe they had been, let's say, a eved. Okay? But in either case, even if not an eved, they ate. Achshav nami et bo v'ochel. Now I will simply immerse and eat. And the Beit Hillel was afraid that the person would forget that at that time last year they were still Gentile. Okay? V'lo yada the eshtakad nachri hava. And they didn't remember, they didn't realize or know that last year they were still Gentile. V'lo mikabel tumah. Okay, and they weren't susceptible to a status of being tameh. Achshav Yisrael, but now that they've converted and they've become Jewish, umikabel tumah, and they are susceptible to the status of being tameh, that's a problem. And therefore, Beit Hillel would say, no, let them wait, okay, a certain period of time, in other words, till Pesach Sheni, and then bring, then bring the Korban Pesach. Okay? So Beit Shammai, however, Savre lo gazrinan. They're of the opinion we don't make such a decree. Aval arel Yisrael, but an uncircumcised Jew. And remember, that could come about if, let's say, there was the third son in a family, and he saw that, unfortunately, after circumcision of the older two brothers, because of some situation, they died, and therefore that Jew was not circumcised. Divrei hakol tovel va'ochel et pischo la'erev. Okay? In that situation, they would permit that uncircumcised Jew nevertheless to immerse and eat their Korban Pesach that night. V'lo gazrinan arel Yisrael mishum arel nachri. And we don't make a gzera, a decree, saying the uncircumcised Jew must become circumcised based on the example of the uncircumcised converting Gentile. The Gemara continues to tell us, Nam Tanya Nami Hachi, and we have a Braita that teaches likewise. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, he says, Lo nechlaku Beit Shammai u Beit Hillel al arel Yisrael shetovel va'ochel et pischo le'erev. That Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel did not disagree about a uncircumcised Jew who simply, we'll say, immerses and eats his Korban Pesach that night. Al ma nechlaku, What did they disagree about? Al arel nochri, regarding a uncircumcised Gentile. Shebeit Shammai omrim tovel va'ochel et pischo le'erev, that according to Beit Shammai, they say he can immerse and eat his korban pesach offering the night. Beit Hillel omrim, but Beit Hillel says, haporesh min ha'orla, one who separates himself from his foreskin, kiporesh min ha'kever, is like one who must separate himself after the burial, after the tomb. Now, Gemara picks up and tells us the following. Amar Rava, this is Rava Arel, and regarding the one uncircumcised, Haza'a, regarding the status of sprinkling. In other words, let's say that it's the person has to bring the water for sprinkling. Okay, and if he has to bring it in a situation where the 14th of Nisan is also Shabbos, that's problematic, right? Because how can he bring it for that purification, especially if it's Tamei Mace, right? Where his seventh day might turn out on the 14th, which could be a Shabbos. Ve'izemel, and regarding the circumcision knife, likewise, if it's for conversion and it needs to bring the knife, and what happens is that 14th again comes out on Shabbat, ha'amidu divreihem b'makom karet. The rabbis nevertheless maintained their position, their statement, because of the punishment of not eating korban pesach being karet. Onen, but regarding a acute mourner, umitzora, or someone who was a leper, ubeit hapras, or a situation about going through a beit hapras, a field that might have bone remnants in it, lo ha'amidu divreihem b'makom koret. There the rabbis did not maintain their standard, their ruling, okay, vis-a-vis the potential punishment of karet. And now we're going to see why, as we explain them. Arel hada amran, regarding the uncircumcised, as we've said. Haza'ah, regarding a situation of sprinkling, right, for perhaps corpse tuma. Da'amar mar, as the master said, haza'ah shavut, that sprinkling, the prohibition of sprinkling on Shabbat, if that, even when it's the 14th, is a rabbinic prohibition. Ve'ena doche et haShabbat, and it doesn't put off, right, the Shabbat. Izemel, regarding the circumcision knife. Tanya, as we teach in a Braita, Kashem she'ein mevi'in oto derech reshut harabim, the same way we're not permitted to carry it on Shabbat through a public domain, public thoroughfare. Kach ein mevi'in oto derech gagot, so likewise we're not permitted to carry it by rooftops, v'derech hatzerot, or through courtyards, v'derech karpifrot, or through other enclosures. So the Gemara tells us, again, that's the case. Onen, on the other hand, where the rabbis were strict, okay? Onen hada amran, the onen, the acute mourner, as we said. Mitzorah, in regard to the leper. Maihi, what is it? Tanya, as we teach in a Braita. Mitzorah shachal shmini shelo be'erev haPesach. If there's a leper who the 8th day for which he is intended to be purified on that day results on the eve of Pesach, 14th of Nisan. V'ra'ah keri bo bayom, but nevertheless he sees a flow on that day. Tovel v'ochel. We say that person is able to immerse and eat. Amru chachamim. And the sages say, Afal pi shetvul yom eno nechnas. Even though usually we say that someone who immerses that same day cannot enter the temple precinct in terms of other practices or kodshim, or to be sprinkled. Zeh nichnas. This one, the Metzora, may enter. Why? Mutav yavo asay sheyesh bo karet. Better, we say, that he perform an act where, and that act is eating the korban pesach, where the punishment is karet. V'yidche asay she'ein bo karet. And it overcome or push off an assay, okay, of not the assay of whether or not they should come into the azara that doesn't have a punishment of korah. Going on, va'amar Rabbi Yochanan. And Rabbi Yochanan presents it this way. Davar Torah afilu asein. That actuality, says Rabbi Yochanan, if we take it from a Torah perspective, even that kind of an assay is not found there. Shenemar, why? Because we have a pasuk that tells us, V'yamod Yehoshaphat b'kahal Yehuda v'Yushalayim b'veit Hashem lefnei hachatzer hachadasha. That Yehoshaphat with the community of Judah in Jerusalem were in the temple precinct, on right in that courtyard, on the new, let's say, situation, the new occasion. Mai chatzer hachadasha. What do we mean? The new? Do we mean the new courtyard? That can't be, because that would have to be phrased hachatzer hachadasha. So what does it mean? The courtyard and the new item, shechidshu bo davar, that they made a new enactment. Va'amru, and they said, tevul yom lo yikanes b'machane leviyah, that somebody who had immersed that same day and theoretically had to wait till nightfall, okay, we should not enter the Levitical camp, the second area. Okay, and the temple precinct, the outside area, was considered like the Machane Leviyah from the time of the Mishkan. Beit HaPras, the third example, Ditnan, is taught elsewhere in a Mishnah. V'shavin Beit Hillel Beit Shammai Beit Hillel, and there's agreement between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel that what? Shebodkin le'osei Pesach, that one checks the a Beit HaPras, okay? In other words, that in order for that Kohen, okay, or that individual, that if they have to traverse through a Beit HaPras in order to get to the opportunity to eat their Korban Pesach, that we check that field, right? Ve'ein bodchin la'ochlei truma. But we do not necessarily require that we have to check the field for a Kohen supposedly to go simply to eat truma. My bodkin la'osei Pesach. What do we mean when we say we check the Beit HaPras? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, saying the name by Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, Menafeach Beit HaPras v'holech, that he sort of blows uh, the let's say the top level of earth, trying to move if there's any fragments, bone fragments on it. And before he goes each step, he has to do that and then proceed. Rav Yehuda bar Abaye, Mishmei de Rav Yehuda Amar, what does he suggest? Beit Hapras Shenidash. If you have a Beit Hapras field that there's a path that's trodden down, okay, those bone fragments would then be pushed below, let's call it ground level, and therefore walking on it, that Kohen is tahor, and as a result can proceed to do his Korban Pesach. Hadrana lach ha'isha. Okay. Now we're going to start a new parak. All right. Now this parak is going to deal with two major issues. Okay. One is going to be the issue of what is the status of fulfilling the Korban Pesach. If you missed the first Pesach, what about its parallel on the second Pesach? Are they really both the same, or are there any differences? The second topic in this parak is going to be the status of the Paschal lamb, of the Pesach offering itself. Now, to appreciate it, I'm going to just share briefly the section quickly from the Torah. That's in Bamidbar, okay, chapter 9, starting with verse 10. Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, if any man of you, or if your generation shall be unclean by reason of a dead body, so if one is tamei mate, or be in a journey afar off, or there distant, yet he shall keep the Passover unto the Lord in the second month, on the 14th day at dusk they shall keep it. So it would appear simply from reading the Torah that there are only two conditions by which a person is automatically subject, right, to put off their Korban Pesach from the first Pesach to the next month, namely to the 14th of Iyar, namely if they're tamei mate or if they're derech rechoka, far off, okay? But the Torah then continued, in regards to the second Pesach, they shall eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Okay? So that seems to be similar to the first Pesach, how you eat it. And then continues, they shall leave none of it into the morning. So there can't be any notar from the Korban Pesach. And then again, nor break a bone. So again, that Isur also seems to imply that there are a number of parallels between eating Korban Pesach, first Pesach, and second Pesach. Okay? And then the section finishes, okay? According to all the statute of the Passover, they shall keep it. But the man that is clean and is not on a journey and forbeareth, this translation, to keep the Passover, that soul shall be cut off from his people. Okay? That's the punishment of Koreit, and so on. Okay? Now, giving that background, okay, we go into the first Mishnah. Misha hayat tamei. So that we saw already. One that was corpse tamei. O b'derech rechoka, or they were far off. Velo asa et harishon, and therefore they did not bring their Korban Pesach on the first, namely on the 14th night, 14th of Nisan. Ya'aset hasheni, he shall bring it on the second, namely 14th of Iyar. What happens, says the Mishnah? Shagag o ne'anas, if one forgot, or they were ne'anas, they were in a situation that delayed them inadvertently, right? Velo asat harishon. Okay, it was beyond their circumstances, forced, whatever, however we want to explain, right? And they did not bring it on the first, on the 14th of Nisan. Yaset hasheni, they should bring it on the second. Again, 14th of Iyar. Im kain, lama ne'amar tameh o shahaya b'derech rechoka. If that's the case, why was that spelled out in the beginning of the Mishnah? All right? The implication being, she'ilu peturin mehakaret, that these would therefore be exempt from the punishment of kores. Continuing the Mishnah, ve'elu chayavin b'hakaret, and these others, okay, would be obligated under the punishment of karet. So there's a clear division between tameh and derech rechoka versus shogeg or anus. Now, Gemara, Itmar, about this the following was said. Haya b'derech rechoka, if one was distant, okay, but let's say he knew he was going to be distant, but had registered in a chabura already, planning to come back in time to eat the Korban Pesach that night with his chabura, and therefore, v'shachto v'zarku alav, therefore they had him in mind, I'm going to say, when they slaughtered the Korban Pesach, and when they sprinkled the blood, he also was in mind. Rav Nachman Amar Hutza. According to Rav Nachman, that's acceptable. Rav Sheshet Amar Lo Hutza. And Rav Sheshet, however, says that's not acceptable. Let's see what their argument is. Rav Nachman Amar Hutza. Rav Nachman said it's acceptable. Why? Mechas hu dechas rachmana alav. That the Kadosh Baruch Hu was showing his great mercy for this person. And therefore, number one, okay, under those circumstances, right, if they couldn't bring it on the first, they would bring it on the second, but they would not be chayav koret unless they actually didn't bring it on the second, on the 14th of Iyar. V'i avid tavo alav bracha. And if he did do it, okay, in other words, had been included in the chabura and they slaughtered it and sprinkled for him and everything, blessing on his head. For Rav Sheshet, but according to Rav Sheshet, Amar lo hurtza, he claims that that's not acceptable. Why? Midcha dechiya rachmana kitame. Namely, that according to the Torah, it's deferred just as in the case of somebody who is ritually impure. Tame. Now, Amar Rav Nachman, says Rav Nachman mina aminala. On what basis do I argue my position that it's acceptable? Ditznam, because we have another Mishnah that teaches Mi shahayat tameh o derech rechoka, one who was ritually impure or distant, velo asat harishon, and he did not do it on the first. In other words, the first occasion, the 14th of Nisan. Yaset hasheni, okay, we'll do it on the second. Miklau de ibaye avad, from the general principle that if he was able, if it was necessary, he would have done it. V'Rav Sheshet, however, says, Amar lach, he would answer you that as follows. Hachi, if that would be the case, Sefer de Katani Shagago Ne'anas, the end of our Mishnah, right, where we say that if the person forgot or was in extenuating circumstances, V'lo asat harishon, and he did not do it on the first occasion, Ya'aset hasheni, that he will do it on the second. Midikatani v'lo asa, and since our Mishnah said he didn't do it, Miklal, the ibaye avad, from the implication, therefore, is that if it was necessary for him to have done it, Hare shagag, v'hare ne'anas. After all, here he forgot, or it was under extenuating circumstances. Ella, rather, okay, we have to say that, right, mezid katani bahadayu, that there seems to have been some intent, therefore, taught in regarding to these two situations. Hachanami onen katani. And here too, then, we're saying that the acute mourner also, katani bahadaihu, also teaches that that person is similar to these two. So the status of the onen would be similar to the shogeg or the anus, in his view, right? Now, Amar Rav Ashi, focusing on this machloket, matnit nami daika. It would seem that our Mishnah also is exact in its language. Okay, the katani. Why? Because it teaches elu pturin mehakaret, that these are the ones that are exempt from karet. Ve'elu chayavin behakaret, and these are the ones that would be punishable, obligated under karet. Ahia, on which case, ilema ashogeg v'ne'anas, if I'm going to say, okay, that we're talking about the one who forgot or under extenuating circumstances. Shogeg v'ne'anas b'nei karet ninhu? Shall we say that the one who did by accident, didn't bring their offering by accident, or was under extenuating circumstances, that they are really subject to the punishment of karet? Ela lav amazed va'onen, but rather that must refer to somebody who intentionally didn't bring it, and also to the person who was the acute mourner. V'Rav Nachman amalach, and Rav Nachman, however, would say as follows: Le'olam amazed lechude. No, he says there that might apply to somebody who with intent only did not bring his offering. Ubadinhu, and this seems logical, it seems reasonable. De'ibayela lemitna chayav, that otherwise it would be necessary to teach, okay, that therefore one would say to be obligated. V'hai de katani chayavim, and the fact that our Mishnah teaches it in the plural, that they are obligated. Aide de tana reisha p'turim, since our Mishnah taught as a stylistic element, that it taught in the beginning that these specific ones would be exempt, Tana Sefer Chayavim. It taught, therefore, at the end of the Mishnah, stylistically, that these others would be obligated. Now, Amar Rav Sheshet, says Rav Sheshet, Mina Aminala, on what basis do I say? Tanya, that it was taught the following. Okay, Rav Sheshet, remember saying that it's lo hurtza, that it's not acceptable. What does he argue? A Braita by Rabbi Akiva says as follows. Me'amar Tameh. It says clearly in the Torah, Tameh. Ve'ne'amar b'derech rechoka. And it clearly says in the Torah at some distance, right? Let's go over a bit on Sadi Gimel. Ma Tameh shesafek biyado la'asot. Whereas the person who is corpse tameh, there is a doubt, there is a question, right? Okay, about to do it. Ve'eno oseh, and therefore is not to do it. This is the view of Rabbi Akiva in the Braita. Derech rechoka, if somebody is distant. Nami shesafek biyado la'asot. Also, there's a doubt, a question, whether he's going to be capable of doing it. Ve'eno oseh, and therefore doesn't do it. In other words, those people should be put off to the Pesach Sheni, 14th of Iyar. V'Rav Nachman amalach. And Rav Nachman, however, responds with the following. Rabbi Akiva leta'ameh. Rabbi Akiva gives his explanation, in other words, his statement of that Braita, is according to his own rationale and reasoning. The Kasavar, because he's of the opinion, Ein shochtin v'zorkin al tamei sheretz, that one is not permitted to slaughter the Korban Pesach, sprinkle its blood in a situation where the person, I'm going to say, is simply tamei sheretz, okay, as opposed to tamei meis. Va'ana, says Rav Nachman, but I, severe le keman de amar, shochtin v'zorkin al tamei sheretz. But I'm of the opinion, and I don't hold like Rabbi Akiva, because I'm of the opinion that somebody who, okay, that you can slaughter and can sprinkle of the blood for someone in a status of tamei sheretz, and I'm going to simply add, and the prohibition only applies to tamei meis and not tamei sheretz. Okay, and that's where we're going to stop today. Okay, because as we continue, all right, we'll see it's going to go into a little more detail and then begin to deal with the issues of first Pesach, second Pesach. Are they exactly the same or not? Okay, so everybody take care, stay well, and hopefully
Have a good
maybe
day.
we'll
Good
see
day,
you
everyone.
at the Siyum Mishnayos.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone. Be well.
Bye-bye.